All right, everyone, very excited about this episode. And to be honest with you, it is long overdue. We're going to be speaking with Tiffany Aliche. Now, Tiffany is the founder of the Budgetnista.com, but her story, I mean, we're really going to cover everything. I mean, she has created a worldwide movement. There are 500,000 to 1 million people in her tribe who are reclaiming their financial lives one step at a time, one actionable piece at a time. And she started this because it sounds like she basically had the first 20 plus years of her life financially perfect. So you can do so much right. And then somewhat, for some whatever reason, just deviated from that path and decided to make a point and just destroyed her finances over the intervening 5 years, realizing, oh, that was a bad choice. But you know what? I get a second chance. She not only fixed it for herself, but made it a point to help others. And in the process, has become a global phenomenon and started a worldwide movement. So I am beyond excited to go back, reveal kind of her own personal story, a little bit about her business adventures and how she has gone from fixing her own finances to really making this world a better place for the next generation. I think this conversation is going to be worth your time on so many levels. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. And yeah, I think you set this up perfectly. This is an episode, we could probably have 10 back-to-back episodes with Tiffany and talk about something different every single time because her story has a little bit of everything. Like you said, it's financial knowledge and perfection at the beginning, some hardship and overcoming that, right? And then creating a tribe based around identity. It's the dream catcher. She has nearly 1 million dream catchers who self-identify as that throughout the world. And it gives me chills when I even think about that. It is all about identity and moving forward and making your life better 1% at a time. So Tiffany, with that, welcome to Choose FI.
Hey, Brad. Hey, Jonathan. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're excited. I feel like this is long overdue. I feel like it shouldn't have taken us 4 years to have this conversation, but I'm so glad that I won't look back a year from now and said, still hasn't happened yet. What are you doing? Anyway, let's talk about financial perfection. I feel like you did the first 20 years right. How do you do the first 20 years right and then have it fall apart? Give us a sense of your money story.
Yeah, well, you get the first 20, 25 years right when you just listen to what your dad tells you to do. So my dad was a CFO and an accountant. He's got like 2 degrees in finance. So one in finance, one in economics. And so just growing up in a household, he literally used to sit my 4 sisters and I down to say, we're talking about money. I can remember having my first job and I'm dating myself, but we used to have the passbooks. They used to like a passport for you millennials. And then you would go to the bank and they would like print on there how much money you had and how much money you were withdrawing. And I would have to sit with him every pay period to show him how much I deposited, how much I took out, what did I use it for. And so I thought this was normal, that everyone kind of went through that, but they didn't. But he was very intentional about teaching us about money and talking to us about the family's finances and showing us how to invest. And it wasn't really until my mid-20s that, that's when you start, as the kids say, feeling yourself. And I thought, I don't need to listen to my dad anymore. Totally, I can do this. I am clearly Warren Buffett in the making. And so I went to a friend of mine, well, air quotes friend, who I thought was wealthy, because when you're 25 and someone has like a nice car and a nice apartment, you think that's what money is. And I asked them to teach me how to invest so I can make a ton of money because I really wanted to retire my parents. And he said, sure. And he convinced me that the best way is to use other people's money and to take money off of credit cards. And I never even knew you could do that. I know. I saw that.
Sorry, I couldn't help it. I couldn't.
No, it's okay. Because I cringed sometimes. I'm like, Tiffany, I want to go back to 25-year-old Tiffany. But you're like, don't do it. But nonetheless.
Would we be here talking today if you hadn't made this mistake?
Yep, exactly. So I'm actually grateful for it. So I didn't even I had one credit card that I used to pay off every month because that's what my dad told me to do. And he was like, no, open up a few more and you can literally pull money off.
Your dad didn't tell you to do that. I'm confident.
No, no. This is, I like to call him Jake the Liar, right? So Jake the Liar was like, no, you could totally open up other credit cards. You've got good credit. You can pull money off. And this is a cash advance, which of course we all know now interest rates on cash advances are like criminal. And so I did this to the tune of, I want to say maybe it was $20,000 or $25,000.
Go big or go home.
I mean, I was like, if we're going to invest, let's do it.
Using other people's money. Oh.
I know.
What'd your dad think of this idea when you brought it to him?
I didn't.
Who would bring that to their dad? Come
I
on.
know, because I wanted to surprise him with, look, I made this decision on my own, and I'm making, so the promise from Jake the Liar was we were gonna like purchase goods. He was a French citizen, and he had like all these stores supposedly in France. So we were gonna purchase goods from New York and send them to his stores, and I was gonna make $2,000 a week for 2 years. So now I have these credit cards that I've never had before. I've already pulled out the 20,000. I remember distinctly when I was at the bank to pull out the money that they kept me there for like an hour. They thought I was like a runaway or like, you know what I mean? Or someone had like, because they were really like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah. They're like, is someone doing something to you? I'm like, no. And so
I got this.
Well,
There's no
well,
red
kind of,
flags. This is the green light. Go.
yeah. And so literally they just kept asking. I didn't, and you would think like that was literally like something screaming like Tiffany run, but it didn't click. So gave him the 20,000. We had a contract and everything, but of course, almost as soon as he had it, he was gone. I didn't realize he was gone. So now I had these credit cards and I'd never used them before. And now I have this temptation. And now I know I'm going to be rich soon. So what does a 25-year-old
You got
do? Who
$2,000 a
knows?
week coming your way in just
Yes.
a matter of
I
months.
mean, it's party time. And so I ran up $15,000 on the credit card, buying like, because I really wanted to be a entrepreneur. So I bought like one of these coaching programs. And that's really what I bought. It wasn't like I spent it on clothes and things like that. The coaching program itself was, I think, $15,000. And I'm sure the person who closed the deal was like, I closed this deal, but like, because who typically, I'm sure they weren't getting $15,000 deal closes. But so I bought this coaching program, which was okay, I guess, but certainly not worth 15,000. So now I'm $35,000 in debt. And then I go to collect from Jake the Liar, and he's gone. And it took me 2 years to really accept the fact Jake wasn't coming back.
Because you're waiting for
So
him
really,
to fix this, right?
yes. I was like, who's taking responsibility? It's not my fault. He's a liar. He's the thief. He's going to give me my money back, because that's what thieves do. They give you your money back.
Yes.
And so
That's been my experience.
Exactly. So there are a few things I did a lot wrong, but the small things that I did right really saved me. So it's like the little bit of sense that I did had said, you've got these credit cards and your credit score is still pretty decent. You're going to have to eventually pay these off. What if we transfer this money to these balance transfer cards? So 0% interest. So I did that. So it was like, whew. And I had such good credit. It was like almost 2 years, my interest, like where I had 0%. So that helped significantly. And so I started paying back just the minimums. I was working still as a teacher. I was a preschool teacher for 10 years. I was working still as a teacher. And so I was paying just the minimum because I still was trying to convince myself that Jake was going to come back and give me back my money. So after like a couple of years of just paying the minimum and realizing that's not going to happen, I said, Tiffany, you're actually a pretty good saver. Just do it, save your money. I was making maybe at the time $50,000 a year. So not a tremendous amount of money, but I lived pretty simply. I bought my car in cash because my dad told me to. He took me to the lot to get a $5,000 car. And I honestly didn't have any other debt. Well, I had just gotten my master's. So there was that, but student loan debt wasn't crushing. And I paid off my undergrad loan. So I was living in an apartment with my sister. So we were paying fairly low rent. So my life was pretty inexpensive despite not making a ton of money as a teacher. So I said, I'm going to start saving. And that's when the 2008 to 2009 recession hit. So I said, this is the year when I go back to school, I'm going to set aside maybe like I can live off half my income and I'm just going to get aggressive with paying down this debt. And so 3 days before the new school years were supposed to start, they called us and said, yeah, we lost our funding. There's no more school. And I'm like, wait, what? And so all of a sudden now, I didn't have any income. So I've got this humongous amount of credit card debt and no income. And that's when the slide I took the tumble down into the dark hole of just what it felt like financial ruin. Because by then I'd bought a condo. I had the student loan debt. Now I have this credit card debt. And it just seemed like I was in this hole. I was in a hole for just about $300,000. Between the condo, which was $220,000, the student loan debt, which is $52,000, and the credit card debt, which was $35,000. So yeah, it was like a really hard time because not having any money coming in and just being like, well, what am I going to do now? So I actually asked my parents if I can move back home. I didn't even tell them what happened. I didn't tell my dad until years later what happened because I was really ashamed and embarrassed. So yeah, I moved back home with my parents. I was 29 going on 30, and I stayed with them for a year. Then I moved in with my sister for a year. And I was just trying to figure out what did I want to do? because I think like so many people, the recession scared me so much that if a teacher, I don't know, there's a job more essential. If a teacher can lose her job, is there any such thing as security? So like my sense of security was shaken to the core. So I did not want to go back to working for anyone because to me, it was like if they could take my teaching job, they could take any job. I don't want to build up my hopes and my dreams and, and my talent in a place that can be taken. And it's not my fault because I was a really good teacher. So I decided I wanted to work for myself. I didn't know in what capacity. So one thing I was really good at was teaching. And even though I was struggling financially, I was struggling less than most people during the recession because I leaned back on my old lessons of budgeting, saving, frugality. And so I leaned back on it. And so friends started asking me, can you show me how? And I did. And then their friends started asking, and then friends of friends. And before I knew it, strangers, I was helping strangers with their finances. And one day my best friend said, you should turn this into a business. And so I was like, okay, because I used to do, well, I still do, but as a teacher, I did a lot of volunteer work and I liked teaching financial education even back then. And at the time, my baby sister, Lisa, told me that although I was not a fashionista, I was certainly a budgetnista. And so, yeah,
Wow.
so I think
I
she
hope
was just
she
being
still gets
insulted.
royalties for that little
I
jab.
know. It was a jab. And so I was like, you know what, Budgetnista. So back then, I actually registered the business thinking that because I like to volunteer so much, I thought that I was going to have a nonprofit. Like I was going to be a teacher and have this nonprofit. So I kind of resurrected that business that I wasn't really using back then. And I said, I'm going to use this to teach financial education. So I started like one-on-ones, but I realized you really can't scale one-on-ones. And then I thought to myself, I reached out to my mentor and she said, you should really think about getting back into the classroom and getting a contract to do so. So I reached out to some of the places that I volunteered for and I was able to get my first contract with the United Way. And they were paying me like $300 or $400 a class. It was awesome because during this time, like I said, I did a lot of things wrong, but some of the things I did right were that, I made that balance transfer, but I also lived really frugally. I lived with my parents, then I lived with my sister, then a friend of mine who's in the same position, she was a teacher as well, had found this really beautiful brownstone where the woman who owned it was selling it, or not selling it, but renting it out by the room. So my friend Diesa lived there. She's like, you should move here too. We invited our friend Joy, our friend Nina. So it's like four women in their late 20s, early 30s, living in this beautiful brownstone, but we're paying $500 a piece. And so it was like, it's $2,000 rent, but not really for us. So it was awesome. So even though it was like living in a sorority, even though we were like grown adults. And at first it seemed like some of my friends were like, oh, that sucks. But it really didn't because almost every woman in there was just starting her business as well. Like Nina was a budding designer. So my first book, The 1 Week Budget, she did the cover.
Nice.
Diesa, she was a gym teacher, but she was also like an avid reader and taught English. She did the editing. And so we would just use each other's gifts and talents to help each other. So honestly, it was awesome. And it was just a lesson in sometimes less is actually more. Some of my happiest moments were then when, literally I was at my brokest. I could afford $500 rent. I didn't drive anywhere because I couldn't afford the gas to put in it. And we used to go to events with is there going to be food there? I'll be there.
That's fantastic.
Oh,
Yeah,
that
but
is
honestly, it was like I lived there for like 2.5, 3 years, but it was an amazing experience because it allowed me to try something new, to build something without the pressure of maintaining a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And also too, so what it also taught me, because I mean, I grew up pretty frugally too. We've always lived a pretty frugal life. So, but it just reinforced that my happiness did not stem from those things. So even though now, I guess you could qualify me as, I don't know if you qualify me as wealthy, but certainly rich. I have a 7-figure net worth. My husband and I, we still live fairly frugally. Like my car's a 2016, but it's paid off. The house that I live in is paid off. We just bought a rental property that we're renovating. It's paid off. My husband's car is a 2017. It's paid off. We are literally 100% debt free. Paid off my student loans, paid off my parents' house just 2 years ago. And so not only are we debt free, I was like, I want to make sure that they were debt free as well. But like, if you were to see me, I mean, like I live in clothes from Target. Like it doesn't bother me because to me, security is more important than anything else. But yeah, it was just like building the Budgetnista. And during those times, it was just such a great growing lesson for me as a person, but also too, learning like how do you create a business where you could be of service to people and still make really good money and still have like happiness and time. So I'm in complete alignment, which is something that was really important to me. Like when I graduated college, I told myself that I wanted to live life in complete
Mm.
alignment. I didn't want to be like, oh, my job sucks, or like I hate this, or like there's no part of my life that I can say looks like that. So I'm really lucky.
Tiffany, that's amazing. That word alignment, that is so critical. And that actually brings up a question I wanted to ask, which is going back to that fraud. You said it's not my fault. You had that external locus of control that someone else is acting on you, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to taking ownership of it and moving forward knowing, okay, I made a mistake, but I'm taking ownership. And I'm curious, like, how long did it take to come to grips with that? And because really, like, the hardest part of most of these journeys is psychological.
Mhm.
When did you finally come to grips with that it was your fault, and how did you move forward?
Well, I had to tell myself it was like I want to say when I finally starting to pay, I was 20. So really the scam happened at like 26ish, right? So by 28, going on 29, I was like, okay, Tiffany, Jay the liar is gone. And I don't care how many times you call his phones or you try to track him down via social media, he's gone. And I had to I had to tell myself, I understand why you did it because you really did want to help your parents and retire them and all these other things. But that doesn't negate the fact that this is your responsibility. Like you put yourself in this place. One, you literally have this financial expert that you call dad that you did not reach out to. Because literally one phone call, dad, what do you think? He'd be like, are you crazy? This
When
is
did you tell your dad?
I
What?
let me tell you. So in my book, The 1 Week Budget, the last chapter I added at the last minute, it was about digging your way out of debt. And I told the story in that last chapter. And I gave my dad that book. I had to have been 32. And I was like, I want to read you to read. I want you to read this book. And I'm like, read that part. So I didn't even I let him read it, and he called me, was like, "Oh my Tiffany, is that why you moved home?" He had no idea because by then it had
Wow.
been years. Because I was so ashamed because I knew that. I mean, my dad is still the go-to. Like if I call my dad now, he still give me financial lessons. He's 77 years old. He still is a heavy investor. He's still the go-to for his friends. So there was really no reason not to reach out. I know some people don't have access to folks with knowledge, but here I was, I grew up with that. And so I was embarrassed that I didn't reach out
Mm,
to like the person that I knew best because of my ego,
right.
because I wanted to prove that I can do it with little to next to no knowledge. But yeah, it took about 2 years to be like, he's not coming back, Tiffany. And this is your issue. This is your problem, and you can wallow in it for another 2 or 3 years, or you can just do something about it. And since learned to what I call that being a paper towel person. So my dad is someone who, like, if we were kids, because I'm one of five, if I spilled something, my dad would be like, "Do you know how much juice it takes to give to five kids? We don't have juice like that, Tiff. You have to be careful." Yada 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 yada. And then he would get me a paper towel. My mom, you spilled the juice, she grabbed the paper towel and she got it to you. My mom is super solution oriented. And it's probably one of the reasons why I didn't want to tell my dad, because I knew he was going to be like, "Tiffany, do you know?" And I'm like, I don't want to hear it. And so I have now learned to commit myself to being a paper towel person. So when I make a mistake, financial or otherwise, to really get straight to the solution, because you're going to have to get to the solution anyway. And that lesson with Jake the liar, Jake the thief taught me that like, you spent 2 years of fussing at yourself when you could have just got to the solution and you would have been in a better position sooner.
I will say one thing for Jake the liar, Jake the thief. Like he did follow his own advice. Like he was investing with someone else's money. It just happened to be yours. So the man's
No.
consistent. I just want to, we've been throwing a lot of shade at him, but I just want to point out, like the dude's consistent.
Yes, but I will say this, that every once in a while I Google his name. And it's with great satisfaction that he tried to scam the US government. And so now he's sitting federal prison. So hey
Oh,
Jake, hope you have Wi-Fi there. Maybe you can listen in.
okay.
Yes.
All right.
Mhm.
I was. I'm sure that will warm his heart to hear this shout out.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, Jonathan, I don't think I've ever laughed this hard on the podcast.
it's been sitting with me since the beginning. I was like, well, the dude was following his advice. Like he probably could have created a course around it. I wouldn't have bought the course, and I don't recommend you buy the course. But let's be intellectually honest here. I want to talk about shame just for a second here, because with your audience and people that maybe are going from years of drift or huge financial problems that feel like it's just insurmountable, what you just described is a reflection of that to some degree. And you've
Mm.
clearly had your own way of dealing with it and your own perspective coming to the other side. But I'm curious, when you match up what you actually did with your dad and you're kind of like, I needed to wait. I wasn't there. I wasn't ready to tell him and just solve the problem. I had to dig my, and then when you pair that with what you see, the people that have found your content and are benefiting from your content, whose lives are being changed, what's the overlap there? And how do you address the issue of shame and money shame with those people that are trying to take that first step?
And so what helped me is my friend Linda. So what I encourage people is to find them a Linda. So what that means is for the 2 years that I was like steeped in the shame, I was afraid to tell anyone because I was Tiffany, the go-to girl for money. So how could I be broke and super debt? And so I was ignoring all my friends. I wasn't picking up my phone. And finally she broke through and it was like 2000, maybe 9. And she's like, what's wrong? And I'm just like, oh, everything's fine. And then I just broke down into tears and I told her about how I owed so much and how I've been tricked by Jake. And she just started laughing. And I'm like, I failed to see what's so funny. And she was like,
I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing. It just
she's like, I'm like, okay, Linda. I don't think this is funny. She was like, she literally said, welcome to everyone else's life. We've been broke. Because I know Linda since I mean, our parents are friends. So I've known Linda from before I even got here. And she was like, literally since high school, middle school, college, you literally have been the only friend that had any sort of financial sense because none of us really grew up learning anything about finance. And so everyone's been struggling. This is your first time, like, welcome to the real world where all of us have been struggling. The recession has taken a lot from all of us. So what you're experiencing is, yes, like everyone else. This is why you're hiding. And so that lesson that I learned was like, oh, so there's an African proverb. My parents were both born in Nigeria, and there's an African proverb that says, fear makes the wolf bigger than he is. And so this fear and this shame had exacerbated the problem in my head when if I had just stepped outside of myself, I would realize like, this one's struggling, the doctor, the lawyer, the engineer, the pharmacist, that people are having a hard time. Money is something that a lot of people have a hard time with. It is not special to you. And it allowed me, quite honestly, to forgive myself. So the shame is really steeped in the fact that you have not forgiven yourself. I had to say, you shouldn't have given Jake that money. You should have asked your father. I get it. Tiffany, it's okay. You didn't kick anyone's puppy. You didn't steal from anyone. You made a mistake. It's natural. It happens, and you're here to live another day to do something different. So I had to acknowledge the role that I played, take full responsibility, and then I had to forgive myself if I was going to get over it. And I did finally, I forgave myself. And it was then that the solutions that I kind of grew up knowing started to like, finally, we were waiting for you to see us, Tiffany. We've been here all this time. So the solutions were really like frugality. We're really going back to budgeting, saving, having a plan for paying down debt, all those things I had known already. And it took a long time. I think because a lot of people, when they reach out, so a lot of my dream catchers, when they reach out, they'll ask me, and I could tell that what they're looking for is, and I do this thing where I tease them, I say, hold on, please. They're like, what are you looking for? I'm like, the magic wand. They're like, funny, Tiffany. I'm like, there is none. You're asking me this question about how can I raise my credit score 100 points? I'm buying a house next week. Ma'am, that's not how that works. That's not how that works. And so there is no magic wand. So once you acknowledge your role, forgive yourself to shed yourself of that shame, then understanding that the plan is going to take time and it's going to be one foot in front of the other. And so it took time for you to get into this mess. So it'll take time for you to get out. And once you acknowledge that, you realize that, I always think like 5 years, 10 years is going to pass anyway. How will it find me? Can I be steeped in the shame? Because I could have literally let that thing that happened with Drake. Sorry, Drake, not you. I could have
You
literally
keep doing
let
good
that
work,
thing
sir.
happen.
Keep doing good work. Don't let this hold
I
you
could,
back.
I could have literally let that thing fester. I could be where I am right now, still festering with like, if he only had not taken that money, or instead I used it to build, this like multi 7, almost 8-figure a year business. And so yeah, I'm just glad that, that clicked in where I was like, I have to forgive myself. And so that's what I tell dream catchers or anyone who listens to me is that acknowledge your role, forgive yourself. And one of the ways to do that is to share some of that experience with other people because you will find a commonality that you are not alone in what you're going through. And that's why I started. So I have a Facebook group called Dream Catchers Live Richer with the Budgetnista, right? So in that group, it's almost 500,000, mostly women. We do have a few guys in there, but I always tell the guys, your guests don't act up. The block button is real here. And so almost 500,000 people in that group. And what I love about it is that that group is Linda. It is the place where you can share what's going on, what's happening. And then someone else says, me too. Or, yes, me too. Last year, this is how I solved it. So it's a place where you can share without fear, without shame, and you can find solutions and people who have done the solutions to the things, to the problems that you're now currently trying to fix.
Yeah, that's amazing. I like how you said before, you need to find them a Linda, right?
Mhm.
And there are 500,000 Lindas in
Yeah.
that one group. That is remarkable. I kind of wanted to talk about like the intersection of these issues that you had and potentially any type of imposter syndrome moving forward, because I think a lot of us feel this. But yet, it's the stories that make the world go round. It is that struggle that you've overcame that makes you relatable. If you were perfect, who wants to get lessons from someone dictating about their perfection? And I think it was interesting before when you said you were struggling less than most during the recession.
Mhm.
And your friend Linda said everyone has been struggling. And I'd love to hear about that inception point of the Budgetnista. And if you had doubts, did you have doubts of who am I to do this? Or is it, I've got this information, I have this story, and I've got to get it out there?
No, I was terrified to tell people, like, because in the beginning, when I used to teach, because I was volunteering when things were good, like, where I was great financially. So I realize now that, like, I'm sure I was like a terrible financial educator back then, because it was very much like, well, why would you do that? Okay. Like, because I had not made any mistakes, So I'm speaking from this financially perfect place where I was 25, I had $40,000 saved, even though my job wasn't paying a whole lot. I bought a condo, just all these things. And it wasn't until I was knocked down a peg and a peg and a peg and a peg that I started to realize, like, that sense of judgment is not helpful. But I do remember the first time, I think, at my first interview, I think it was like AOL, when AOL had, like, I forget what vertical it was they had, but they were interviewing me. And I remember deciding, should I be truthful about my foreclosure, about like some of the debt issues I had, because I was so afraid that I was afraid of two things. I was afraid if I didn't say it would come out and then people would say fraud, fraud, fraud. Or I was afraid if I did say, people would say, why should I listen to you? But I decided that I was more afraid of being found out down the line. So I might as well just be honest now. But it wasn't joyfully done. It was done from a place of fear. And it wasn't until I started to share my real story that people really started to connect. And it was like a light bulb went on, like, oh, people are not coming to you for the perfection. They're coming to you to say, you've gone through the same thing as me. Can you tell me how you fixed it? Like, for real, And then I was like, oh, so the more I shared, the more people are like, oh, thank you, Tiffany. I went through foreclosure and I have credit card debt. So yeah, it took me a few months to get that feedback before I realized that I don't have to be ashamed of the things, the mistakes that I made. Actually, if I had not made those mistakes, this is why I'm so grateful to Jake. And I'm teasing you, Jake. If you're listening to this from jail, I was just joking. That I'm glad for that, because if I had not made that mistake, how could I relate? How do I tell someone who doesn't have enough money to pay rent and buy groceries what to do? Because I know that feeling. I know what I had to do. So how could I tell someone who feels like honestly helpless, where it's like, okay, my bills are 5,000, but I'm making 1,500, 2,000. What do I do? I know that because that's exactly where I was. And so, like I said, I'm grateful for the struggle, because in that, it's like, that's truly where I'm able to serve from. Because the teaching part is the easy part for me. I was a teacher for so long. I've got my master's in education, but it's the relating part that I had to learn through my own mistakes. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't have imposter syndrome anymore, because I tell my dream catchers, I'm not here to be your financial guru. I'm here to be your financial girlfriend. Like, we're just friends who are talking. It's like you have a friend that you might be like, oh my gosh, they're really good at, I don't know, doing their hair, but you don't expect that your friend went to like cosmetology school. You're just like, she's just got great hair. Or, like my husband's like, he like loves fixing cars. And so he didn't go to like mechanics, he's not a mechanic, but he just enjoys that. So no one comes to him with the thinking like, you're a mechanic and you should be able to know all the things. So I feel that way about what I do, that I'm not a guru. I don't consider myself an expert or a guru, just an educator and really your girlfriend to help you along.
Yeah, I want to talk about the dream catchers for a second here. There's some pretty impressive numbers there. I mean, there's some humble origins. In fact, out of financial, not actual bankruptcy, but from a balance sheet, it didn't look great. It didn't look great. And it wasn't like you had it all fixed, completely fixed by the time you started helping people. You were helping yourself, cleaning up your own mess and using the process that you were using to clean up your own financial baggage to now start working with people on a one-on-one setting, on a financial coaching setting, teaching group classes. Like, help us get a sense for this business that's become something truly tremendous. Talk us through kind of the humble origins and how we get to this dream catcher community of over 500,000 people.
Sure. So it started off, like I said, with the one-on-one. And, I realized, okay, I can't really scale this. And plus, in good conscience, I was like, this doesn't feel right. I'm helping this woman. Her kids are running around. We're doing her budget. And it says negative $200 at the end. And I know that I'm owed 100. And I'm looking at her, looking at the kids, looking at the paper. And I'm like, oh, never mind. Don't even worry about it. After 4 hours worth of work, because I just couldn't, in good conscience, take from someone who obviously didn't have it. So I thought, okay, I have to think of a new business model. And I thought, okay, one to one it doesn't scale. So what about one to few? And so that's when my mentor stepped in. She had this successful nonprofit. And she said, as a nonprofit, one of the ways they make their money are contracts. She said, you need to get contracts. And I was like, oh my gosh, Christine, thank you so much. Okay, how do I do that? She's like, that's up to you to figure out. Gotta go. I was like,
I've given you the question. Go find the answer.
but it was the best thing. By the time I was like, is she kidding me? You need to get contracts? And that's I'm thinking like, okay, well, let me make a list of all the places I volunteered with before. I emailed all of them, maybe like 50 in my Gmail. And said, hey, it's Tiffany. I volunteered with you before, but I teach financial education and I would love to do that for your organization. I have a company called the Budgetnista. No one wrote me back except for one organization, the United Way here in Newark. And the woman who wrote me back, her name was Catherine. And she wrote back to say, Amy, who you emailed, no longer works here. That was the email. I was like, wait, well,
An
can I come
auspicious start.
I said, well, can I meet with you? And what I didn't know, because Catherine and I are still really good friends to this day, what I didn't know was that Catherine just started in her position for community development, that her job was to create programs for the community to come in and use for free. And so she's like, sure. So I met her. We became fast friends. And on the way out, I got my not so best-selling book at the time, The 1 Week Budget. I grabbed it and said, I should bring this with me. And so whenever I'm nervous, the teacher in me just comes out. So we're talking and she mentioned something about her budget. And so I go into a zone and I just start teaching her like a budget class. And I was just like, oh, like I put aside my ask and I was like, well, let me see this. Well, what about this? And I whipped out the book and literally did a coaching session, not intentionally, just because like that's my go-to.
I go there
And she
too.
was like,
It happens.
yeah,
It's like a
yes,
comfort zone. It's like, ooh,
it is.
if I could talk about anything, let's just make it this.
Exactly. And so she was like, that was awesome. Do you think you could do this for the staff? I was like, yeah, you think you could prepay? Kidding. No, but can you prepay? Um, so I think it was like at that time to teach the staff, it cost us like $500. And I remember that's when I was just considering moving into the room with my, like renting a room in that townhouse. And she was like, yeah, we can prepay. And she was like, come and do your session. So the one thing I never have imposter syndrome about is my ability to teach. Like I know 100,000%. If I'm not good at anything else, teaching is the thing I'm good at. If you could teach 3 and 4 year olds, you can teach. And so I came, I remember I went to TD Bank, to give away the free pens. I'm sure they're not expecting for you to take all 20. I did. I went to the dollar store and got all these folders because I wanted to like really show up. And like I asked a friend of mine who worked for like some company, she could make my photocopies for me. And like I just set up the room and I taught my little heart out and I killed it. And she came back to me, was like, that was so good. And a week later, she said, I'm getting complaints for people who missed your workshop because they were gone, they were out. Can you come back and do another one? And yes, we'll prepay on that too. I was like, okay, sounds like rent to me. And so I came back and I did another one, same thing. Thanks, TD Bank. You really helped me start. And then she
The
said, "This is
pin, the
so
pin
great."
jar was gone again. That's what I just heard.
Yeah. I was like,
That manager, that assistant store manager still remembers those 2 weeks.
where did our pens go? And from there, she said, "This is so great. I would love for you to do like a series of workshops. Do you have a series?" I said, "I sure do." Meanwhile, who has a series? Not me. And she was like, "Okay, just write a proposal. Who knows how to write a proposal? I didn't." And I was like, "Sure." I literally tweeted, "Help. I need help writing a proposal." This is back then when Twitter was a little bit more localized,
Mm.
where you followed people who really lived in your surrounding area. It wasn't as global as it is now. And so a woman, her name was Michelle Thomas, I'll never forget. I didn't know this at the time, but she was the communications director for the city of Newark. And I had been tweeting some of my volunteer stuff for the last couple of years, where I would just say, "Anybody want to help me volunteer with the homeless today? Anybody want to?" So she'd been following that. And she said, because she loved how much I volunteered in her city, that she was going to help me with my proposal. And I was just like, wow. So it was also a lesson in that, like, giving activates abundance, right? Through service, people will tell you that if you give too much, you serve too much, you do too much for free, it's a bad thing. And I disagree. So because of that, Michelle, like I said, I didn't know she was a communications director. I actually didn't find out until years later. And I saw her on TV and I'm like, wait, she was the communications director? And so I sent her all of my mosh posh of stuff. Like, as a teacher, I knew how to write a lesson plan and things like that in a curriculum, but I didn't know how to write this proposal. So she put it together in proposal form. I still use that proposal to this day. It has yielded me hundreds of thousands of dollars for me and my friends. We use it as a template. And so she put it together. I submitted it to the United Way. And then I started a series. It was a 6-week series that I wrote. And people, like, I think 5 people came to the first one. And then I told the United Way, "Well, why don't you let me advertise?" Because in my mind, I was thinking they're not going to have me back if only 5 people come. And they said, "Okay." So social media was just starting to get to be more than just you telling your friend your baby's cute. It was starting to really, like, business was just starting to bud then. So I changed my Facebook name to Tiffany the Budgetnista Aliche, because there was no Facebook business pages back then. And so I started posting like, "Hey, who wants to take this free class? This is the time. These are the days." And people started coming. It was 5 people in the first cohort, because it was 6-week class every Tuesday. There were 20 people in the second cohort, then 30, then 50. Then we had to get another room. And so I worked with the United Way for like 2 or 3 years. And at the peak, I was doing like 2 or 3 cohorts in a week. So I was
Wow.
making decent money. Yeah. I think I had peaked at like $500 or $600 a class. And then they started buying books for all the students. So I was making a few $1,000s a month. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's an alignment. I'm teaching. I'm teaching, helping my community. It's not a financial burden on the people who can't afford it, because the United Way pays me. This is awesome. But it was also exhausting. And I said, okay, you can't scale this, Tiffany, beyond what you've done now. Like, are you going to work 7 days a week? So I said, okay, so what's the next step? And the next step kind of was presented to me via people. Social media started to open up, and it wasn't just people in New Jersey following me. I remember the first person, she was in Florida and said, "Hey, I want to come to the class." I said, "Okay, sure, here's where it is." She says, "No, no, I'm in Florida." And I was like, "You're gonna fly to Jersey?" She's like, "No, can you come to Florida?" And I'm like,
Yeah, next week.
"No."
No problem.
And then someone from California, and then someone from Idaho, and I was like, okay, so how do I serve these women who don't live here? And I thought, okay, so one on one, that's the beginning, one to few. Then what about one to many? Well, really, that's one to infinite. So I took my 6-week class and I put it online and I called it my Live Richer Challenge. When I tell you something, the Live Richer Challenge is one of the most pivotal moments in my journey as a person and as a business. And so honestly, some of my friends who are my financial friends were like, "I don't understand. This is this 5-week course." So I condensed it into 5 weeks, the first challenge. 5-week course, you're doing it for free. How you gonna make any money? And honestly, I didn't know how. It cost me $10,000. So I didn't even have 10,000. It was just 100 here, 200 there, 500 here, to pay for like the platform, and to pay to have someone create like a logo and all these other things. I only knew it cost me 10,000 because at the end, when I pulled all my receipts together from my accountant, I'm like, $10,000. And I just remember thinking, I want to be able to provide the service for free. And my aim was to get 10,000 women signed up. It took me 8 months to get 10,000 women signed up. I wanted to launch the challenge in January. So it was January 2015
Did you
when
get
we
8,000,
launched.
10,000 women to sign up ahead? Is that what I just heard?
But it took me
Wow.
8 months. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
started in the summer. I didn't know anything about ads. It was just, I used to post every day and all. By then, there was no Instagram, but it was like Twitter, Facebook, Twitter, Facebook. Join the challenge every single day. Every time I spoke at a local church or a local this, join my challenge, join my challenge. It's free. And people were like, free, seems scammy. But women signed up, and we had literally just over 10,000 when we launched in January. And it was live. And so every day they would get a task in their inbox. So because I was not tech savvy, it ended up being the best thing in the world that I'm not super tech savvy, because it forced me to figure out a way that forced people to what I call take a tour of the Budgetnista house. So you hit every one of my platforms. One, you sign up for my email list. Okay. So that's one. Now I got your email. Two, I was like, okay, how do I get people to take the course? So you get an email and it says, today's task is I'm going to show you how to create a budget. Click here to learn how to create a budget. I didn't know where to house the challenge other than a blog, because I didn't know how to do a blog because it's just a template. So now I'm getting blog traffic, but I wasn't thinking that back then that like, oh, this is traffic to my blog. It was just like, I'm so glad I don't have to build anything. So they went to the blog. And so now they're on the blog reading. I have downloadables there. It's a full lesson, because that's one thing, like I said, I do know how to do is create a full lesson. And then sometimes a lesson was a YouTube video that I would tape on my laptop, and I didn't know how to edit, but I could cut off the beginning and the end. I'm like, close enough. You know?
Close enough.
That's how I learn. So like whenever I do tapings with things now, I always tease like the person who's recording me, like they call me One Take Tiffany, because I had to learn because I didn't know how to edit. I'm like, oh no, we have to learn how to get it within here because I don't know how to edit in between. And so but what happened then was now all of a sudden I've got YouTube people watching. You know, I grew my YouTube channel. And then when Twitter came up with this thing called click to tweet, I realized, I want to add that in my blog post. Now all of a sudden people follow me on Twitter. And then when I was teaching at the United Way, I was getting so many emails from my students that I said, Facebook groups just opened. And so I said, I'm going to create a Facebook group where don't email me, post your questions in the group so I can answer them for everybody. And I called them the Dream Catchers, my United Way students. Somehow, when people were taking the literature challenge, they found that group and started requesting to join. Because I knew everybody personally, because my United Way classes weren't huge then. And I was like, well, who says they're not in the United Way class? So I was just denying people, like, deny, not realizing, like, Tiffany.
Let me in.
I know. So then I let them in. So now all of a sudden, the Facebook group, but literally everyone was getting a tour of the Budgetnista house. You're joining my email list. You're going to my podcast. You're following me on Twitter. You're going to Facebook. And so the literature challenge that December, 10,000 people were helped. And then people reached out, just like with the United Way. Someone said, this is so good, Tiffany. I missed it. Can you do it again? And it was so exhausting. I was like, I'm not doing it again. But I thought, well, maybe I'll automate it. So I automated it where you can sign up and then it would just send you the daily task every day. And so by the end of February, 20,000 people had signed up. By the end of the year, 30. Now over 900,000 people have taken one or more of the literature challenges. Now that first challenge, I didn't know anything about affiliate programs. Like Ally Bank, you owe me some coin.
For the first year.
Yes. Ally Bank, because I remember Ally was like, it was like a new bank and their savings account was paying out more than any other online only savings account. And so I was sending people to Ally Bank, and I used to do a weekly survey to see if people took action. And at the time, about 3,000 or 4,000 people signed up for a bank account. Can you imagine? And I didn't know, but then Ally had this affiliate program where they're paying you $25 per person that signed up. When I found out, I like wept because I was broke. So imagine $25 times 4,000 people. And I was like, wait, is it retroactive? But that's when I started to learn about monetization. Because someone was like, oh, are you doing affiliates? I'm like, what's an affiliate? They're like, wait, so those 10,000 people that came through your challenge, how are you getting paid? I'm like, paid? They're like, Tiffany, you can get paid. And so I learned about affiliates. I also, too, I even fought against this. I wrote my first book, The 1 Week Budget, was not doing that great. It was doing okay, but not that great. So I wasn't really interested in doing another book, but someone who was going to take the challenge said, I really would like it in book form. And I'm always fighting against money. And so I'm like, well, duh, Tiffany. And she said, can you put it in a book? I said, well, why would you want me to put it in a book? Because then it's going to cost you money. Hello, it's free online. And she's like, well, Tiffany, one, some people want to support you. And two, I'm someone who likes a book. And I was like, your loss. So I put it in a book and literally just the blog post, formatted it differently. I paid like a kid $200 to format it, uploaded it to Amazon. And I remember their self-publishing platform was called Create Space back then. And I remember it took 2 years for my book, The 1 Week Budget, to hit like the Amazon bestsellers like list for budgeting. It took 2 days for the Live
Wow.
Richer Challenge book to do so. And I remember being like, wait, you guys want books? And so, yeah, it just was selling like crazy. And that's how I made my money back because that first January, I made $10,000 from people buying the book on Amazon. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I started to do the challenge and I still do them every year, every January. We come up with a new one. We have 5 of them and they're all free still. You go to livericherchallenge.com. They're all free in there. There's the fundamentals, credit edition, savings edition, net worth, and home buying edition. And then one coming up now, I have something called financial wholeness. So it'll be the financial wholeness edition. But it was a game changer. It was a game changer because what I didn't recognize then, what I understand now is that the literature challenge wasn't just like, okay, people are being helped, yes, but because I have like a certain way of like talking, and a certain way of being, I was indoctrinating dream catchers because you enter into the challenge. You like everybody knows I start with hey, 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 and like there's a certain way that I teach. So you were going through like Tiffany boot camp, like to be like, I love Tiffany. By the time you came out of Tiffany boot camp, it was like, I love the budgetista, I love Tiffany, and but I
Say
didn't
it with
recognize
me.
that. Yes. And so it was honestly, aside from, losing that money to Jake and it causing me to educate differently from a place of empathy, this was hands down it created the business. I would not be here. I would not, where do you gather? Where do you get 900,000 people? I mean, there are times, even when a new challenge comes out, we always get this huge bump. It might be another 300,000 people will sign up just to join the new free challenge. And it allowed me to, one, I got to really understand who was my demographic because we would do surveys and I would understand like, so when brands and things come to me now, I'm able to say, nope, 40% of my ladies really want to save. Nope. 30% of them really want to, pay down debt. I know who they are, what they need, and it allowed me to create my most profitable business, the Live Richer Academy, because I believe basic financial education should be free. I helped to get a law passed in the state of New Jersey, making it so for middle school students because New Jersey already had a law for high school. So a friend of mine who's an assemblywoman, when she won, she came to me and was like, I want to do something for financial education. And I was like, well, Jersey has a law. We're like a forerunner in that for high school. But honestly, as a former preschool teacher, kids as low as kindergarten really should be learning pre-financial education, age appropriate financial education. And she said, okay, let's work on a law together. So we did. And we got it passed for middle school. So we're still working on the elementary school component. And so for me, I think that financial education, the basic financial education, how to budget, how to save, how to pay off debt should be free. That's why the challenges will continue and will always be free. But people had taken the challenges and were like, Tiffany, you taught me how to budget. You taught me how to save. You taught me how to fix my basic credit and pay off debt, but I need more. And I was like, well, even though I was doing things for myself, it wasn't enough that I felt like an expert to teach it. Like I invest for myself, but not enough to teach you how to invest. And so I thought, well, what do you want to do? At first, it was going to be an investment club. And they're like, well, yeah, let's do an investment club, but I want to learn how to start a business. I'm like, well, that's not an investment club. And I also want to learn about insurance and I want to learn about estate planning and I want to learn about retirement. And I thought, well, who teaches me those things? So I started to pull my financial friends who helped me to do those things. And I said, could you teach a class? And they did. And I combined these classes and I created what's called the Live Richer Academy. And right now we got like 40,000 students in the Live Richer Academy.
Wow.
And we just hit our first 7-figure month in April. And our reoccurring, so we are at 8-figure a year business because our reoccurring is like, I don't know, $850,000 a month.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
amazing.
like,
That's
you
eight
know,
figures.
yes. And so like,
Congrats.
but
That is
I
incredible. Wow.
preschool teacher 10 years ago to now. Isn't that just so crazy?
That's amazing.
That Tiffany, that is amazing. And I wanted to ask you about the teaching. So you light up normally, but you light up even more when you talk about teaching, right?
Yeah.
Like that at your core is who you are. That's what I'm gleaning from you. What makes a good teacher and what makes you a good teacher?
So what makes a good teacher? A good teacher is a good student, one. So you have to be open to like I'm constantly learning, constantly listening, constantly reading. But really what makes a good teacher is somebody who actually cares. Because your student, whether it's a 3-year-old, a 33-year-old, a 103-year-old, can feel if you actually care about them. And so what I think people ask me sometimes the secret sauce of like the Budgetnista, why has it done well? And it's because my dream catchers can tell that I really care. Like I think about them, I care about them, I try to create solutions. Like I really care, that more than the money, more than all those other things. Like I care. That's why I did the literature challenge because I could have made money with that. I could have just said it's $1 and made $10,000. But I was like, no, it's much more important to me that you get the help that you need. I'm truly concerned about, are you okay? Like when I taught preschool, and I learned that teaching preschool because 3 and 4 year olds, it's not about discipline really when you're teaching preschool. Like you have to really almost love this child like your child because 3 year olds, they don't know. They're like, my mom's not here, so you're my mom, And so literally I loved those kids. It was like, is Cora okay? Is Jonathan fine? Do they need something? And so you really learn to teach from a place of true caring about your students. And so that carried over into when I started to care for and serve adults. And I think a lot of people, because of preschool teaching me that type of teaching, I took that with me where maybe somebody who has never had the opportunity to teach younger grades, where that's basically a requirement, then like I just see a lot of financial educators out here now who it's about the doom and the gloom and the shame. And it works for some people. Some people like to be shamed into doing better, but I just don't know that that's helpful. I believe in taking responsibility, but I don't know if I believe in making you feel bad. To what end? You know what I mean? My aim for you is to be better, not to feel worse. It's like, yep, we're going to take responsibility. Yep, you shouldn't have done that, but we're here now. Here's a paper towel. And so I think, yeah, that's what makes a good teacher. It's that empathy, it's that true caring because you can, like you said, I light up, you can feel that. And so people come because I'm not teaching anything. Like you can literally Google budgeting. Why do people come to me? It's not because I'm teaching something like, oh, I might teach it like in a more fun way, but that's not why people come. People come to me because they're like, I know here at the Budgetnista, I'm going to be looked after. I'm going to be cared about. And I know that Tiffany is not going to do or bring anything to me that she does not really think is what's best. I mean, people call me all the time for me to sell things to dream catchers. I could be making more millions a year
More
if I said yes.
millions.
But like I say no to almost everything because I'm just like, that's terrible. No, no, no. I'm not selling that or I'm not sharing that because I don't think it's good for people. I have something called the Lisa rule. Lisa's the baby who named me the Budgetnista because Lisa's a dream catcher. And I remember one day I was sharing an app that I thought was awesome and in an email that I was sending out. And she called me because she always pretends like the Budgetnista is different from Tiffany. And she's always like, oh my God, did you see Budgetnista's email? Totally excited about this new app. I'm like, my email? She's like, whatever. Budgetnista Budgetnista said this app is awesome. And I actually started to get nervous. I was like, wait, what app? And she's like, the app that Budgetnista just sent out. And I'm looking and reading, and I thought, why am I nervous? Isn't this a good thing, Tiffany? Because my rule before used to be like, if I use it, I'll share it with you. But I realized that that wasn't a good enough rule because I'm more protective over Lisa's financial journey than I am for myself because I'm willing to try a bunch of different things. And I realized I need to turn up the integrity when it comes to sharing. So now I have my Lisa rule and I ask myself, if Lisa were to call me to say that she signed up for, download or whatever it is that I'm sharing, how would I feel? If I don't feel 100%, then I'm like, oh, great, Lisa, this is awesome for you, then I don't share it with dream catchers.
Yeah. You know, what you described
Got it.
over the last 30 minutes is a masterclass in like what it looks like to compile a talent stack. It's a term that we've really adopted in this community and we coined from Scott Adams, who really talked about it in one of his books. I've actually started personally identifying as a talent stacker, meaning like that's just who it's part of my personality. That's who I am. I look for ways to combine what might on the front end look like dissimilar skill sets, combining them together to make something really awesome. And when I look at how you went through, like you didn't know exactly how it was all going to come together at the end, but I just think about that teacher that was making 50K, you, this earlier version, 50K, but realizing the most valuable part was not the actual subject you were teaching or the dollar amount that you were making, but the fact that you learned how to teach and what makes a great teacher. And then when you stack that, like some people stop at the next limiting belief, well, I'm not good at technology. And you said, well, what would it look like if I was passable? What would it look like for me just to try? What's the worst that could happen? And then on top of that, you built your network. It's probably a good idea to start cultivating a network before you need it. Your earliest version where you had roommates, basically you turned it into an incubator where you're able to
Yep.
draw on each other's skills because you kept your debt threshold low and you kept your expenses lean and you very early on identified the difference between looking rich and being wealthy, the variance between the two. You were able to, as Scott Trench always says, you're turning risk into opportunity. Other people couldn't have taken that if they had to figure out how to pay for their expensive mortgage. You capped your rent at $500 a month. You also weren't afraid of the question, right? You would look for better questions like, how do I do that? How do I click to tweet? How do I get people to go check out all my different platforms? Along the way, you're just kind of stacking on one additional skill set after another. And when you pair that with the fact that you're adding such immense value to individuals' lives, at some point, your actual form of monetization is largely irrelevant. And I say this to people through the lens of there's two audiences that we're reaching with this exact episode. We're talking to individuals that are trying to do better with their personal finances, trying to learn from your mistakes, but we're also talking to business owners. This could be the same person with just a year or two of space between. Like, one, you're cleaning up the baggage now, but you're pivoting. What did Tiffany actually do? And like, I'm telling you, as you're saying this is actually what I did. Like this almost, I mean, the exact implementation looks slightly different, but the mindset, the learning new skills and figuring out how to incorporate, it looks like what Brad did. It looks like what countless other entrepreneurs that weren't entrepreneurs at one point, but became what they have done. And you can do it too. I'm getting such incredible value, not because like you're telling me something that I haven't seen or understood, but it's another example of what it looks like. And it further confirms that this is an accurate worldview. This is actually how it works. I'm so inspired by your story. And just the fact that teachers, you have, however undervalued you may feel, you have the most valuable skill set in the world. Forget whatever class you're teaching right now, whatever dollar amount your school system is paying you, the ability to take that skill set and apply it to your own interest and knowledge. That's it. That's the juice right there. And so I love your story, Tiffany.
Thank you. Honestly, I tell people like being a teacher in a classroom, it was better than any business school I could have ever gone to. Like learning how to take someone from a place of no knowledge to knowledge. I don't think people realize how incredibly hard that is. And like imagine like, you have a 3-year-old, like my niece is downstairs, I'm sure tearing up my house. And I'm like, Amelia, this is red like an apple. She's gonna say, what's an apple? And you're like, oh, that's and now you're like,
Go
oh,
back.
great. Now I got
Yep,
I
I'll
gotta
go
go
back.
all the way back. So, so imagine, so if I could teach her that just to get to red, then me showing you how to budget, I'm like, oh, I could do that with my eyes closed. Because so knowing how to teach, and then not just that, but when you're a teacher, you also learn to be a leader because you're leading this classroom. Like I have to make sure I'm not yelling at 3 and 4-year-olds. So how do I establish authority in a place that's kind? So even looking internally at my business, we just did an anonymous internal survey, and there's like 22 of us. So my business partner and I did not do it. So 18 people completed the survey, and one of the questions was, are you happy that you work here, or to something to that effect, like are you happy that you work here, and why so? 18 out of 18 said yes. 18 out of 18. And one of the reasons is that preschool teacher, Tiffany, creating a safe environment for you to learn, for you to grow, to be cared for is what I also do internally. So I call my internal team the unicorn. So we call ourselves the unicorn squad. I tell them because they make magic happen every day. And so I'm always teacher Tiffany. So I'm always talking and sharing and teaching ways, especially to my lead team, how to be a leader. So how to create a safe environment where people can mess up. I've got this like internal joke that when somebody makes a mistake, I'm always like, no, front and center. Who did you kill? Who did you kill? And they're like, what? I just sent the wrong email. I'm like, exactly. Nobody dies. You want to create like a really like open space to like, I want you to make mistakes because in making mistakes, we learn. I'd rather the $500 mistake now to avoid the $5,000 mistake later, or the $5,000 mistake now to avoid the $50,000 mistake later. And also too, we have like this chart when it comes to pay, where it's like you personally know your color. No one else knows your color but you. And if you're blue, it might mean that you're working on 3 projects. If you're yellow, maybe you're an intern, and then you see the range in that. So you know what you have to do to move from blue to green, or to move from range 1 to range 2 to range 3. But it creates this fairness because it's mostly women that work with me. And there is a gender wage gap. And I wanted to dispel that, even though literally 95% of my team is women, but I wanted to dispel that you're worried about, well, am I being paid fairly? Well, it's like, well, here's the chart. Everyone is a color, and you could tell exactly what color you are by the level of responsibility that you have. And so I try to create a space of transparency, like I said, of kindness, that we truly do care, not just about what you do for us, but what are you doing out there? I do something called Unicorn Spotlight, I would say every 2 weeks, because so many people who work on our team also have side hustles. And I've literally put six figures in people's pockets. Like, okay, we're going to spotlight you, Logan. Logan is our content manager. She's amazing at writing emails. She wrote an email for me once because we do affiliate stuff now that made us $130,000 in 3 days. And so imagine when I put Unicorn Spotlight and I said that on my social channels, which cumulatively is over 1 million people, Logan got like 400 people. She was like, yeah, I decided I don't want to write for nobody else. She's like, Tiffany,
I
I
just
can't
stay
even get
here.
through the email, you know? But I want to, because I feel like you're an adult. And if you, because I mean, I make money on the side, so I always say I can't want for myself and not want for you. Is there something I can do to help you? And although we make good money, I still feel like we can pay more. When I first started, we were paying people $9 an hour. Yeah, that's crazy. That's not what we could afford. And people were working for us because they were like, the mission, Tiffany, I'm here because, you provide such an amazing place to work. Now, some of those same people are making six figures a year with us just 3 years later. So,
Yeah.
and so like just even creating, I want not just to create an amazing space for the people we serve externally, but the people who are doing the serving internally. I always feel like I want to enter into an everybody win scenario in all the things that I do. So it's like the unicorns win, the dream catchers win, I win, we all win in a way that's transparent. And so it's one of the reasons to me, if you ask me why we are growing so rapidly, is because they go so hard because they feel looked after, they feel cared for, and they know that I keep my promises. I told everybody who came on and we didn't have much money, I was transparent, like, look, this is what we have, this is what I can pay. And they were like, okay, but I promise, as soon as we do better, I pay better. And so they could see the movement. Now they're like, I mean, literally someone hit me, one of our team members, she's like, girl, I remember when I came on, I was making $12 an hour. And I showed my husband, he was like, this is the woman you want to work for? She was like, she promised me when she does better, she'll pay better. And now that woman, like, I think she's been
Now
with
she's
us
able to
two and a
say,
half.
I told you. I
Yes,
told you.
6 figures a year remotely. So when this coronavirus and pandemic hit, we were already working remotely. So there was no real, other than the fact that a lot of the women have young children, so they were home. But we even create a safe environment for that. Like me, preschool teacher Tiffany, I created like lesson plans. Like if you got little ones, here's what you can do. And if we have to switch meetings because I know sometimes your kids have to do like online schooling, we can do that. Like we are really accommodating. I feel like a happy team. Well, I feel like this, that my rule is everyone deserves to work joyfully. And so like that is one of my aims. And it's so I don't mind making less in the pursuit of that. Because what I found that in the long run, you make not just more, but sustainably more. And so yeah, I'm just like I said, I'm in alignment in all ways. There is no gotcha. Like I'm very conscious of creating an environment for myself internally and externally that's in alignment with my morals and values and goals.
Yeah, Tiffany, it comes right back to that alignment, that giving. It comes back to your answer to what makes you a great teacher, right? It's the caring and empathy. And that's the tie that binds. It really is. You see it throughout your entire story. You see it with Christine at the United Way, who you went in with an idea and you threw it aside and you helped her with the budgeting, right? You see it with your team. You see it with that Ally Bank example. Like I probably at the time that 100 grand or whatever you would have made would have been life changing. But the thing is, the people knew that you're coming from the right place. And almost invariably, those people told 10 friends about the Budgetnista. And how much has that led to? Because you were coming from that place of genuine caring and genuine giving. And it is just a remarkable story. Truly, truly remarkable. And thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I have one more thing I want to talk about before we let you
Oh,
go, because
okay.
I heard that you just wrote a children's book, and I want to know a little bit more about it.
So yes, I decided that I always had this kind of book in the back of my head when I was teaching preschool because I thought these kids would ask me things like, Miss Tiffany, can you buy me these cookies? Or Miss Tiffany, can you buy me this toy? And then I would say something like, well, Jeremiah, like, Miss Tiffany doesn't have any money because, I'm like 22, 23. And they're like, yes, you do. Look in your purse. Because kids think that your purse generates money automatically. I remember one time, this little boy, Jaheim, told me, can we go to the wall? And I didn't know what he was talking about. And then one day we're going for our daily walk and we passed the ATM. He said, finally, a wall. And I just burst out into laughing because he really believed that there was a magical wall that just gave adults money. I'm like, oh, it must be so nice to be a kid. But what it made me realize is that, is there a way to be age appropriate with financial education with kids as little as 3 and 4? Let's see. So we started with penny drives because kids love counting. And I knew, like, a lot of parents were struggling financially. So I didn't want, I wanted to do a fundraise without, asking parents to give money when they didn't have it. So pennies are things that you often can find on the ground, So kids were bringing pennies. I had one of those big water cooler bottles, and they love just dropping it in there because it's sensory too. Like you hearing the clink, and they feel like autonomous. And so every week we would dump it out and then we would count it. So counting is a pre-financial education skill. So we would count it and then we would talk about what are some of the ways that you can use this money. Who can we help with this money? So that was something too, learning about donating and thinking of others, less versus more. That's also a pre-financial education skill. So then I started making up stories for them to learn some of these lessons because I noticed that when I was trying to get through to a 3 or 4-year-old, just saying, hey, we don't hit our friends wasn't enough. So sometimes I would pull out a book specifically that showed maybe like, this mouse and this mouse are friends, but this mouse pushes the other mouse and they're not friends anymore. And so then children can then project and say, well, that's why they're not friends. And I'm like, yes, just like when you hit Jonathan.
Don't hit me.
And I know. And so I had this like kind of story of this girl in my head that because I feel like kids also like to follow a character. And so I created her. Her name is Molly Moore. And she actually, I don't know if they can see it, but you guys can
No,
see.
I'm gonna put it on the screen here to show the book.
So she actually looks like I did back then with my little Michael Jackson afro and like her super chocolate skin. And I wanted, because also too, so I taught in Newark, New Jersey, where most of the kids look like Molly. And I just remember thinking like, I don't see enough books that have little kids on it that look like this. And so so through her book, so this book is about, it's her birthday and she starts to get more and more presents. And at first she's excited about her family and friends. And then she starts to pay more attention to the stuff. And there's a rhyme, the book rhymes, but there's one rhyme in particular that goes, each time a new guest comes to the door, more, says Molly, more, more, more. And so it kind of reaches this fever pitch where there's no place for her friends and family to sit. It's just a room full of presents and she's just focused on the presents. And when it's time to blow out her candle, it's just her presents and her birthday cake. And she realizes what does more really mean? And she decides to donate some of her gifts because she gets multiple gifts, like 3 phones and 4 dolls. So she donates some of her gifts to a local community center, which you see in here. So you get to really learn, like, what does more mean? So it's less versus more. It's donating, it's sharing. But also, too, I don't think like folks understand that even rhyming is a pre-financial education skill because rhyming is the beginning of math. Like, if ask anyone who writes music, music is math, like how many notes are in, you could talk about how many eighths are in a fourth, I don't know. But like music is math, but even in the rhyming, there's like counting involved. So it's like 2 books, 4 cats, 6 dogs in a ball. Da, 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 da. Like, so even when we're teaching kids how to count, typically we're starting with rhyming. So there are all these nuances that preschool teacher Tiffany just like infused in there. And it just seems like this fun book. And then in the back, because I know a lot of parents and educators don't know how to pull in these lessons. So I have extend the lesson questions and extend the lesson activities. Because when I used to teach, I would read books and then I would then use that book as like a starting point for the lesson of the day. And I thought, what if I can make it easy for a parent or a teacher to do so? So it's like 15 years in the making. I'm so proud of it. I'm usually pretty hard on myself. Like I'm not typically impressed with anything that I do. I'm like,
I'm
I
impressed.
guess.
I'm impressed. Um,
But we've already sold, it's only been 2 months. We've already sold 10,000
wow.
copies.
Wow.
And I tell you, parents are equally elated and annoyed because they're like, my kid will only let me read this book for the next 20 days straight. Tiffany, get this book out of my house. And so, yeah, I'm just really proud of it. I can't wait. It's one of like a series. So I'm working on the second one now. And just
Awesome.
like, yeah, it's just full circle where I get to blend the two loves, financial education and being a preschool teacher into one delightful project.
That's incredible. Yeah, it sounds like a book about abundance, truly.
Mhm.
And it's called Happy Birthday, Molly Moore, and that's MALIMORE.
RE. And
Awesome.
that's where you can get it from, mollymore.com. And so,
Well,
like I said, there are things that I'm really proud of, but this is definitely like top 5 to be able to do something like this. I just feel something in me, like if you can get kids early with just like that mindset shift, then you won't have the adults who are just like swimming in debt and feeling so hopeless. And, because that's why I'm here, because of what my father and my mother poured into me and my sisters. Despite the mistakes that I made, I was still able to see my way out on the other side because of that early intervention with financial education. I think every kid deserves that, and every parent deserves tools to help them do that.
I love that. Our missions are so aligned. In fact, we started a nonprofit with a lot of the ethos that you just described to try to get a financial literacy curriculum into schools for pre-K through 12. And I'll tell you, my wife sent me to the library with the desired list of books to focus on these young kids to have these money lessons. There were scarce resources out there. And so I told you just offline ahead of this call, but like, we're going to take a look at getting this book included as one of the recommended resources in the curriculum, just because I know the content you produce. I can vouch for the quality of the content, and to see, someone from this community, from this personal finance community, looking through the lens of a preschool teacher, what would I want my child to know? And then to be able to have that implemented with this growth mindset. What if you could avoid these mistakes? It's incredibly powerful. So you're doing amazing things. You've done amazing things. I'm so excited to see where your brand, your mission, your movement goes from here. And on our parts, we can't wait to figure out what we can do to support you and see you go even farther. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.